turn up.
A pleasant day, learners! Welcome back! Are you ready for another lesson? Today's lesson has something to do with verbs. In English grammar, verbs have 5 properties: the voice, mood, tense, number, and person. In today's lesson, we will focus on the voice of the verb, the active and passive voice. This lesson highlights the grammatical features and forms of the voices of the verb. It also focuses on the different points to be considered in transforming an active voice to passive voice or vice versa. It will help you identify an active or passive voice and how and when it is used. Now, let us try to answer these 3 important questions. Number 1, what is voice in verbs? Number 2, what are the types of voice in verbs? And number 3, what is the importance of an active voice and passive voice? First, what do we mean by voice in verbs? Well, voice of the verb refers to the relationship between the subject and verb of a sentence. It describes its relationship with the subject, object, and any other elements of a sentence. Let us take a look on this example. The sentence is, Mrs. De La Cruz prepared her materials for her online classes. Can you identify the subject used in a sentence? That is right. Mrs. De La Cruz is the subject of the sentence because Mrs. De La Cruz is the one who performs the action. But what about the action used in a sentence? Exactly. The action used in a sentence is prepared. Now, Mrs. De La Cruz prepared what? Absolutely right. Mrs. De La Cruz prepared her materials. Therefore, materials is the object used in a sentence because materials receives the action. Voice of the verb focuses on the function of the subject being either the doer or performer or the receiver of the action. Voices of the verb are classified as to active voice and passive voice. Active voice occurs when the subject of the sentence acts as the doer or the performer of the action. Active voice follows this pattern: the subject or the doer of the action, the verb, and the object or the receiver of the action. Active voice is considered to be a normal form of sentence, but it does not mean that passive voice is wrong. Most of the sentences that we make use an active voice. It is simpler compared to passive voice. Let us have this example. Jose ate his breakfast this morning. Jose is the subject of the sentence because Jose is the doer of the action ate. Jose ate what? The answer is breakfast. Therefore, breakfast is the object of the sentence because breakfast receives the action. Let us have another example. Maria studies her lesson after dinner. Can you identify the subject, the verb, and the object of the sentence? Very good. The subject of the sentence is Maria because Maria performs the action, studies, and the object of the sentence is lesson because lesson receives the action. Now let us have the passive voice. In active voice, if you can still remember, the subject is the doer of the action while the object is the receiver. However, in passive voice, the subject is receiving the action. This time, our subject receives the action. In transforming a verb from active voice to passive voice or vice versa, take note of this. Tense of the verb. If the verb in active voice is in present tense, passive voice should also be in present tense and vice versa. However, the form of the verb as to S form or simple forms vary depending on the number of the subjects, whether they are singular or plural. In passive voice, the main verb is usually introduced by an auxiliary verb. Do you have any idea what are those? Let me show it to you. These are the auxiliary verbs that you may use depending on the tense of the verb or number of the subjects. Passive voice follows this pattern. Subject, which is also the receiver of the action, auxiliary verb, past participle form of the verb, by, and the doer of the action. Now take a look on this sentence. Donna wrote the song. This is an example of active voice, right? Donna is the subject, which is also the doer of the action. Wrote is the verb, and the one which receives the action is song. Now, can you tell me what is the tense of the verb wrote in this sentence? Very good. It's in the past tense. Therefore, the passive voice of this sentence should also be in past tense. If you're going to change this sentence into passive voice, it will now become, the song was written by Donna. In this sentence, song is the receiver of the action written, but at the same time, it is also the subject. Now, we use the auxiliary verb was because the verb gave in the active voice is in past tense. Now, let us have another example. Anna sings a beautiful ballad. This sentence is in active voice. Can you change this into passive voice? Very good! This sentence will now become, a beautiful ballad is sung by Anna. In this sentence, beautiful ballad is the receiver of the action, which happens to be the subject of the sentence, while Anna is the doer of the action, sung. We use the auxiliary verb is because sings in the active voice is in present tense and the subject, beautiful ballad, is in singular form. Now let me show you example of sentences in active and passive voice on different tenses. Do you think active and passive voices mean the same thing? That is right. Active and passive voices are used to convey same things in two different ways. Now it's time for an exercise. You are going to identify the following sentences as to active or passive voice. If the sentence is in active, you change it into passive voice. If the sentence is in passive, convert it into active voice. You may answer this on your notebook. Did you answer it all correctly? Good job! Remember, voice of the verb focuses on the function of the subject being either the doer or performer or the receiver of the action. Active voice occurs if the subject is the doer or performer of the action, while passive voice indicates that the subject is the receiver of the action. Active and passive voices of the verbs are used to convey same things in two different ways. It is important that we use proper voice so that it will not be hard for others to understand us. And that ends our lesson for today.
Now turn up.